Inside a mostly quiet mall in a Pittsburgh suburb, a bronze bust of a horror director watches shoppers walk past a J.C. Penney, unaware they're standing in the most famous filming location in zombie movie history. This mall has already survived nearly 50 years, the death of the American mall as a concept, and a global pandemic. What it may not survive is its own owner. This is the story of how Walmart, the company most blamed for killing shopping malls in America, ended up buying one of the most iconic malls ever filmed just to knock it down. By late 1977, the corridors of Monroeville Mall represented the height of suburban retail convenience. On September 30, 1977, Pittsburgh filmmaker George A. Romero began a production that would permanently alter the cultural significance of the suburban shopping center. For his second zombie feature, Dawn of the Dead, Romero did not construct an elaborate studio environment. Instead, he selected the active mall as his primary stage, filming overnight while the shops were closed. From late September through March 8, 1978, the production crew moved into the building each evening as the daytime shoppers departed. Filming inside an operating commercial center presented distinct logistical constraints. The crew had to work around the mall's daily schedule, pausing entirely during the busy winter holiday season when decorative displays filled the main concourses. While local accounts and promotional materials assert that the movie was shot almost entirely inside the Monroeville property, alternative production records and location logs indicate that certain scenes were completed at other regional sites and within Romero's own studio spaces. Yet, the visual identity of the film remains inseparable from the mall's interior. Under the glare of fluorescent lighting, the wide pedestrian corridors, modern storefronts, and communal eating areas became active elements in the narrative rather than simple backdrops. Romero utilized these spaces to develop a sharp social critique. The undead in his film do not wander aimlessly. They are drawn back to the mall by a lingering, instinctual memory. They ride the escalators, wander past the window displays, and mimic the repetitive daily routines of the living. This behavior established habitual consumption as the central metaphor of the film, suggesting that modern citizens had become indistinguishable from the mindless consumers roaming the aisles. By the time production concluded in the spring of 1978, a permanent connection had been established. The ordinary suburban mall, designed to encourage post-war commerce, was reframed as a monument to modern isolation. Through Romero's lens, the practical architecture of retail became a landmark of American cinema, transforming a functional shopping venue into a space permanently associated with the horror genre. In 2008, toy store owner Kevin Kreese established the Living Dead Museum, a dedicated space celebrating the mall's cinematic legacy. Initially a modest display within his shop, the collection grew into a cultural anchor of its own. After a temporary move to Evans City in 2013, the filming site of Romero's Night of the Living Dead, the museum returned to its spiritual home at Monroeville Mall in July 2021. The museum settled into a permanent space on the upper level, positioned on what was designated George Romero Court, just steps from the J.C. Penney wing. Right outside its doors stands a bronze bust of George Romero, unveiled in February 2021, alongside a replica bust sculpted by Christian Stavrakis. Inside, the space functions as a physical archive of the macabre, housing artifacts that extend beyond Romero's filmography. Visitors find a cabin set reconstruction from Evil Dead 2, alongside a life-size statue of Michael Jackson in his red thriller suit. This specialized collection transformed the mall from a standard retail center into a global destination for horror tourism. For decades, traditional anchor stores drew regional shoppers to Monroeville Mall. By the 2020s, as those department stores began to falter, it was a museum dedicated to the undead that kept people walking through the doors, proving that a brush with pop culture history could offer a different kind of survival. This survival inside Monroeville ran counter to a massive national contraction. Across the United States, the rise of digital commerce, severe retail oversupply, and a broad consumer shift toward open-air plazas steadily hollowed out the enclosed mall. In 1986, the country housed about 6,000 of these climate-controlled structures. By 2022, industry estimates showed that only about 700 large, fully operational enclosed malls remained in service. For the vast majority of these properties, decline did not lead to a second life as a cultural landmark. Instead, it led to decades of blight. Dixie Square Mall in Harvey, Illinois, represents the standard trajectory Monroeville managed to escape. Immortalized as the setting for the famous car chase scene in the Blues Brothers, Dixie Square closed down in 1978. The building stood abandoned and heavily vandalized for over 3 decades, serving as a bleak symbol of suburban decay until demolition crews finally cleared the site in 2012. Today, its vast, modernist corridors exist only in vintage photographs and film frames. For hundreds of mid-century shopping hubs, complete physical erasure was the final chapter, leaving movie footage as the only proof they ever existed. Monroeville Mall avoided this complete abandonment through a highly specific form of consumer behavior. While traditional suburban shoppers migrated to strip centers and online storefronts, a dedicated subculture did the exact opposite. For horror enthusiasts, the concrete corridors were not just a place to browse retail racks, but a physical destination with no substitute. Over the decades, regular pilgrimages replaced the weekly grocery run. Fans traveled long distances to walk the same concourses they had seen on screen, turning the simple act of visiting a mall into a ritual of preservation. This deliberate, intentional foot traffic was anchored by annual conventions and horror events hosted right inside the building. While these weekend gatherings could never restore the mall to its mid-century commercial peak, they injected recurring activity and cash flow into a property otherwise facing quiet decline. This specialized audience gave Monroeville Mall a rare stay of execution. While similar regional properties sat dark, waiting for the wrecking ball, the corridors here remained open, the escalators kept moving, and a smaller roster of merchants continued to operate. The property survived not as a thriving center of modern commerce, but as a living monument, a functioning shopping center sustained almost entirely by what it represented to the people who walked its floors. On January 31, 2025, CBL Properties announced the sale of Monroeville Mall and its annex. A transaction finalized the following month for $34 million. Property transfer records identified the buyer as South Saturn Ridge LLC, a limited liability company owned by Walmart. To manage the site and draft its future, the retail giant partnered with Cypress Equities, proposing a new open-air commercial and retail destination. While corporate representatives expressed strong interest in redevelopment, final designs remain unconfirmed. Inquiries sent to Walmart and Cypress Equities requested clarification on whether a standard big-box store is planned, the feasibility of adaptive reuse, and whether the redevelopment will preserve Romero's bronze bust and the Living Dead Museum. For now, the owners have offered only statements of intent, leaving the cultural landmark's physical fate unresolved. The transition from a community-focused enclosed mall to a big-box retail footprint is a familiar story across the American suburbs, but the Monroeville sale carries a distinct economic symmetry. For decades, economists like David Newmark and Imek Basker have documented how Walmart's high-density, low-price model systematically pressures traditional enclosed malls, often accelerating anchor tenant vacancies by up to 30%. While researchers note Walmart is not the sole cause of the national mall decline, its footprint has consistently redrawn local retail geography. Now the ultimate agent of decentralization has become the literal landlord of George Romero's monument to consumerism. It is a real-world development that matches the dark satire of the 1978 film, replacing a climate-controlled social commons with a standard open-air commercial tract. In October 2025, The first concrete mechanism for clearing the site appeared in public records. South Saturn Ridge, LLC, submitted an application to Pennsylvania's Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program, requesting a $7.5 million grant. The filing outlines an estimated $15 million demolition cost, positioned as a 50% state match. Officially, these state funds target infrastructure projects that promise regional economic, civic, or cultural growth. In the paperwork, the developer uses sterile municipal language, describing the work simply as clearing existing structures to prepare for redevelopment. While this grant remains pending and does not equal a local demolition permit, it represents a formal step toward dismantling the building. To the State Budget Office, it is a routine funding application for a commercial tract. To thousands of film enthusiasts, it is the blueprint for erasing sacred ground. The physical timeline is already in motion. Mall management and Cypress Equities issued notices instructing all remaining tenants to vacate the premises by the end of April 2027. This target date aligns with the developer's blueprint for the Monroeville Mall Gateway, a planned open-air commercial tract designed to replace the enclosed structure with a new Walmart and Sam's Club. Yet, paper trails reveal a gap between corporate ambition and municipal reality. Planning Commission agendas, meeting minutes, and local redevelopment filings show that a target date is not a guarantee. While the tenants face an immediate countdown to eviction, the local planning authority must still grant final approval before any wrecking ball swings. In fact, as of the middle of 2026, municipal officials confirmed that no formal demolition plans had been filed with the borough. The clock is ticking for the shopkeepers, but the legal pathway to clearance remains unpaved. Subscribe to explore more of America's forgotten landmarks and the stories behind their slow decay. On June 12, 2026, the mall's quiet corridors filled with unexpected life. The Living Dead weekend drew approximately 3,000 fans and more than 60 cast and crew members from the 1978 film. For 3 days, vendor booths lined Romero Court on the lower level, just steps from the entrance to Dick's Sporting Goods. Daily shoppers carrying regular purchases brushed past visitors dressed as the undead. These fans did not come to buy standard retail goods. Instead, they treated the working mall like a dying landmark, photographing the escalators, retracing the steps of the actors, and capturing final memories of the physical spaces. While the gathering did nothing to alter the property's financial trajectory, it transformed the remaining retail corridors into a temporary monument. For the attendees, it was a quiet wake for a piece of cinema history, held right inside the suburban hub that inspired it. Another scheduled gathering on October 16th to 18th, 2026, offers what might be the final organized opportunity for fans to gather under the skylights. Key members of the original cast, including Galen Ross and Scott Reiniger, plan to return, though no schedule can guarantee what lies beyond the weekend. This autumn interval marks the beginning of a quiet watch period. Daily business continues, yet the entire property functions on borrowed time. Visitors pausing for photographs beside George Romero's bronze bust understand these images may serve as the final visual record of the site. For now, the escalators continue to run, the doors remain unlocked, and the physical future of this suburban monument remains entirely unresolved. Monroeville Mall now stands on borrowed time, caught between cinematic legend and corporate redevelopment. The supreme irony remains. The force that hollowed out suburban retail is now dismantling its ultimate monument. Whether these corridors rise again or fade into the asphalt, the clock is ticking. We are left to wonder, are we watching a landmark die, or are we simply haunted by its ghost?